Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a joy to be with you here today. This is my first time at the Catholic Family Life Conference. And yeah. And let me tell you, I had no idea what I was signing up for when I agreed to come to this. It's incredible to see so many families here, so many young people, gathered to grow in faith and love, and to strive together to build authentic Catholic families. What an inspiration. I don't think that we have anything like this in Ontario. It's amazing. Now, my colleague, Dr. Logan Weir, and I, Logan is speaking to the youth yesterday and today, had quite an adventure getting here. We've come from Ontario, the village of Barry's Bay, about 2 hours west of Ottawa, where we're at Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College. And our travels were eventful. Our flight from Ottawa to Toronto was canceled, which meant that Logan would have missed his talk yesterday. So we ended up driving an extra 4 hours to Toronto to try to stay on schedule. But then there was a storm in Toronto that delayed our flight again. And in the end, we did finally pull up in here at 3:30 in the morning yesterday. Anyway, As we went through this, we were kind of thinking, is God preparing us for something here, through these trials? Anyway, after all these delays, we finally got on the plane. I settled into my seat, and I pulled out my rosary. And a couple minutes later, the woman who was across the aisle from me turned and pointed in my direction. And she said, "Excuse me, how do you use that?" And in that split second, I thought, wow, all this hassle, and here God has opened an opportunity to evangelize, I thought, this is it. All the canceled flights, the storms, God was preparing me for this moment on the plane. So I turned eagerly to her and said, "Oh, this is a rosary." And I was prepared, to explain the mysteries, the prayers, talk to her about how God invites us into a personal relationship with Him. But then she interrupted and said, "No, that." And I realized she was pointing to the outlet where I was charging my phone. So much for my St. Paul moment on the airplane. Yeah. Now, I'm here today to speak about living Catholic family life and the essential and fundamental role that the Catholic family must play in the renewal of our culture. I want to begin with a story. On March 24th, 1944, in the small Polish village of Markowa, a family was awakened before dawn by the sound of Nazi officers pounding on their door. Joseph and Victoria Ulma, along with their 6 young children and a 7th child still in the womb, were about to become martyrs. Why? Because they had hidden 8 Jews in their farmhouse, which of course was an act punishable by death. So the Nazis executed the Jews first. Then they executed Joseph and Victoria. And as they executed Victoria, she was beginning to go into labor. Then came the final command. And they said, "Kill the children too." One by one they were executed. Stanislava, Barbara, Vladislav, Franciszek, Antony, Maria, ages 2 to 8. This is a story that's almost too terrible to absorb. But it's not just a story of tragedy. It's a story of heroism. It's a story of love. It's a story of a family who lived the gospel so deeply, so simply, that when the hour of great testing came, they were ready. The Ulmas were farmers, and Victoria kept the home. Joseph read the Bible with the children. They prayed together, they celebrated the liturgical year, they had a garden and books and laughter and Sunday outings. You could say it wasn't the walls that made their home strong, but the faith and love that made up their life. And it's ultimately that gave them the strength to lay down their lives. They weren't heroes seeking glory. They were a simple Catholic family, simply being faithful. And on September 10th, 2023, the church formally recognized their sanctity, beatifying the entire family and declaring them martyrs. The Ulmas were the first family ever to be beatified together. Now, I am a Catholic theologian, and I serve as president of Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College as of Tuesday. We're a small Catholic liberal arts college founded by Catholic families for Catholic families. But I'm not speaking to you today primarily as an academic. I'm speaking first as a husband and a father of 6 children, ranging from ages 2 to 16. My wife and I are in the thick of it, raising children, building a home, striving to live this calling in the midst of all of its joys and challenges. I'm by no means here to speak as a parenting expert, more as a witness of what I've gleaned from the church's spiritual and doctrinal tradition and some practical experience. And to be brutally honest, this talk is a bit of an examination of conscience for me as well. So I want to speak to you today about what it means to be an authentic Catholic family, what it means to live the faith as families in our world today. And I want to propose the Ulma family as a model for us. Catholic families today, families like yours and families like mine, are being asked to live the same kind of faithfulness as the Ulmas. Maybe not to martyrdom, but certainly to love, certainly to be courageous as they were, certainly to be great witnesses of the gospel in our world. Now, I don't have to tell you that we are living in profoundly challenging times for married couples, for families, for faithful people, faithful Catholics, faithful Christians. Our culture has not only forgotten the Christian vision of marriage, it actively rejects it. The moral guardrails that once supported family life have not merely been removed, they've been reversed, right? We now face legal, cultural, and moral pressures to conform to views of sexuality, marriage, and identity that are radically opposed to the gospel. Sister Lucia of Fatima once said that the final battle between Christ and Satan will be fought over marriage and family. And that battle seems to be raging all around us. In the breakdown of marriage, the confusion over gender, and the widespread loss of faith among the young. St. John Paul II warned of a new soft totalitarianism. Benedict XVI spoke of a dictatorship of relativism, a world in which objective truth is denied and moral norms eroded. In the midst of this, the church stands as a sign of contradiction. In Humanae Vitae and in countless teachings since, the church has proclaimed with clarity and compassion the truth of marriage, the beauty of openness to life, and the call to chastity and fidelity. She speaks tenderly to those who are caught in patterns of sin, but she does not and cannot compromise. Because Christ doesn't compromise. As he said in the Gospel of Matthew, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. Today, Catholic parents are asking real and urgent questions. How do I pass the faith onto my children? How do I keep them Catholic? Not just in name, but in heart and soul. How do I raise them to live joyfully and courageously in a world that no longer believes? My wife and I wrestle with the same questions. Like you, we're pilgrims trying to live this calling faithfully, often imperfectly. I think, overwhelmed by today's challenges, we can risk falling into 2 opposite temptations. The first is to assimilate. We keep the faith quietly. We go along to get along. We lower our standards just a little so we can fit in, whether it's at school, at work, with extended family. Maybe not because we're cowards, but because we're tired, because the culture wears us down, because we feel alone. Now, the second temptation is to withdraw. We pull back, we circle the wagons, we retreat into a safe little Catholic bubble and hope that the storm passes. We think, if I can just keep the world out, maybe we can keep our children in the faith. I want to propose that Scripture shows us a different path, a harder and deeper path. In the 6th century before Christ, Jerusalem was destroyed. The Jewish temple, the very dwelling of God among the Jewish people, was reduced to rubble, and the Jewish people were carried off into exile in Babylon. We can read of the despair of the Jews in Psalm 137, where it says, "By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept. How can we sing the songs of the Lord in a foreign land?" But into this pain, God spoke to the Jewish people in exile through the prophet Jeremiah. And here's what God said through Jeremiah. "Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. Seek the welfare of the city to which I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." So God's message to the Jews in exile was not to fight or to flee. It was to plant, to build, to pray, to live faithfully in the midst of a pagan world. And through that faithfulness, to prepare for deliverance. And of course, that word wasn't just for ancient Israel. It's for us. It's for us today. We too are living in exile in a kind of spiritual Babylon. And God's message is the same. Live, build, plant, stay faithful. Hope in me. God has not abandoned us. He's placed us here in this time, in this culture, for a reason. We as parents were made for this moment. Pope Benedict XVI, before he was Pope, in an address in 2004, applied this vision to the church in our time. In this address, he said that Christians in the West must understand themselves as a creative minority. A faithful remnant that preserves what is true and good, not to escape the world, but to renew it. A creative minority doesn't retreat into isolation. It stays engaged. It keeps the flame alive when the world goes dark. And we as Christians have done this before. After the fall of Rome, it was Christians, especially the monasteries, that preserved and rebuilt civilization. And today, the call is the same. Not just to survive, but to plant the seeds of a new Christian culture. No one drifts into the faith anymore. To live today as a faithful Catholic, we have to be intentional. Intentional about prayer, about education, about formation, about community, about witness. And that's our calling as Catholic parents right now, to be intentional about building strong homes and faithful communities, not to hide, but to bless and transform the world. So, here's the central point that I want to make in this talk. In the face of today's challenges, Catholic families are called today to live a paradox. We must turn more deeply inward, rooting our lives in Christ, building up the domestic church, forming intentional communities of faith. And at the same time, we must turn more boldly outward, embracing the church's mission of evangelization, becoming salt and light in the world. This double call, inward and outward, is not a contradiction. It's the very rhythm of Christian life. Just as Christ withdrew to the mountain and then went out to preach to the crowds, so too the Catholic family must draw strength from within and then radiate it outward. So that's the double movement that I want to explore with you today. First, the inward, how we live the hidden life of faith in our homes and Christian communities. And then the outward, how we answer our call as families to mission in the world. I contend that Catholic families who truly become what they are, who live with love, intentionality, and fidelity, and who embrace their mission in the world, are the key to renewing our culture through the gospel. And I want to go a step further than that. I want to maintain that raising our children for mission is the surest way to keep them in the faith. Okay, so now I want to begin with the first task before us, building the hidden life of faith in the home. If we are to renew our culture, we have to begin where Christ began, in the hidden life of Nazareth. Before mission, there's preparation. Before we go out, we have to go deep. The renewal of culture begins with the renewal of the home. And I want to speak to you about a powerful witness of this vision, the servant of God, Catherine Doherty, who took seriously the call to form what Pope Benedict XVI would later call a creative minority. Catherine was born in Russia in 1896. She lived through the upheaval of the Russian Revolution and fled as a refugee, eventually arriving in North America. After years of suffering, including a failed marriage and the sting of poverty, she encountered Christ in a radical way and dedicated her life entirely to him. In the 1930s, she launched her apostolic work in the poorest neighborhoods of Toronto and New York, founding Friendship House, which was a lay movement devoted to proclaiming the gospel and serving Christ in the poor. But then in 1947, following what she described as a divine prompting, Catherine left the cities behind and came to the forests of rural Ontario, to Combermere, just down the road from where I live today in Barry's Bay. There she founded Madonna House, a new form of lay community, a community of men, women, and priests living together under promises of poverty, chastity, and obedience, committed to prayer, manual labor, community life, and hospitality. Today, the Madonna House apostolate continues with about 200 members serving in Combermere and in mission houses around the world, including one nearby in Edmonton. From its earliest days, Madonna House sought not to shelter its members from the world, but to form them in the gospel so that they could shine as a light to the world. Catherine's vision was not one of retreat, but of radiant witness to a culture in collapse. She understood that true cultural renewal would come not primarily through activism or flashy campaigns, but through quiet, hidden fidelity to God in daily life, which she called the spirituality of Nazareth. Catherine Doherty often said that the answer to the crisis of our time was simple: go to Nazareth. And of course, she didn't mean a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. She meant embracing the spirit of Christ's ordinary, hidden home life with Mary and Joseph. For 30 years, the eternal Son of God lived quietly, obediently, humbly in a home. The creator of the universe spent most of his earthly life not preaching to crowds, but working in a carpenter's shop, living family life, embracing the ordinary. His hidden life was not a pause in the divine plan. It was part of the plan, a silent daily offering of love that sanctified the mundane and revealed the dignity of ordinary life. Nazareth is the place of ordinariness and quiet fidelity, of dishes and diapers, chores and prayers. It's the school of love where we learn to give ourselves in small acts, small daily acts of service and sacrifice. It's there in the hidden life that souls are formed for greatness. Catherine often reminded her community that Nazareth can be lived anywhere, in an apartment, on a farm, in the suburbs, in a tent. It's not a place, but a spirit. And very early on, she began an apostolate to families, founding what she called Cana Colony, which were week-long summer family camps to support married couples in living out a Catholic vision of home life. Catherine believed that the family, too, was called to live Nazareth, to be a place where the gospel is incarnated in daily routines and where love becomes a transforming force. Now, this vision of the family aligns with the church's teaching on the nature and mission of the family. And I want to look especially at the teaching of St. John Paul II and what he had to say about the family. You know, when John Paul II was canonized in 2014, I was blessed actually to be there in Rome for the canonization. He was declared by Pope Francis to have been the Pope of the family, right? He spoke so much about the family. He had such a deep concern for the family. So he's really the great magisterial authority on the nature and mission of the family. John Paul II described the family as a community of life and love. He taught that the family is a living image of the inner life of the Trinity, a communion of persons bound together by love. You know, according to the church's traditional teaching, it's the love of the Father and the Son for each other that from which the Holy Spirit proceeds. And so too, the love of the husband and wife gives rise to new life, a child. Now, the family's mission, says Pope John Paul, is to become more and more what it already is. He says its mission is to become a community of life and love that guards, reveals, and communicates love to the world. And he declares, family, become what you are. So the family is defined by love, and of course, not love as a sentiment or love as a feeling, but love in its deepest sense. Love as a self-gift, love that pours itself out, that serves, that sacrifices. To build the domestic church is to make the home a true school of love, a true school of prayer, a school of Christian life. Now, Catherine's Nazareth spirituality provides a powerful vision for how to live out this mission of the family in our day-to-day lives. And I want to highlight 3 simple but powerful pillars of Catherine Doherty's Nazareth spirituality that I think can be very helpful for us. The first, the duty of the moment. As Catherine would say, the duty of the moment is the duty of God. Practicing the duty of the moment is a kind of asceticism. It's a spiritual discipline. And it means asking one simple question again and again. What is God asking of me right now? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but right now. What is God asking of me right now? It means changing the diaper. It means doing the dishes. It means taking the extra 5 minutes to really be attentive to your child and listen to them. Doing it with love. As one Madonna House priest puts it, how can you expect to become a saint if you can't even make your bed? Right? Sometimes the duty of the moment is simply offering up the frustration of stepping on that Lego barefoot at 3 a.m., right? Sometimes that's the duty of the moment, and I'm convinced this is one of my children's favorite forms of parental penance, you know. Yeah. So it's the little things done with great love that prepare us for the big things, for those moments of real testing. And when we do the duty of the moment faithfully, everything we do becomes a prayer. We ourselves become a prayer, a self-offering to God through striving moment by moment to live out God's call. Okay, so that's the first pillar that I want to talk about, the duty of the moment. The second one, gospel poverty. Nazareth was not a place of wealth or status. It was a poor, quiet village. And that simplicity wasn't an accident. It was part of how God chose to save the world. At Madonna House, Catherine called her community to embrace simplicity and detachment, not just for its own sake, but to make room for grace. And we as families are called to live this too, but each in our own way. Simplicity teaches us to let go. It clears out the clutter. It makes us more generous. It opens space in our hearts for prayer and for God's grace to work. Okay, now the third pillar, living the liturgical year. To live Nazareth is to live by the rhythm of the church's life. The liturgical year isn't just something that we do at church. It's meant to shape our whole lives. I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute. So we have 3 simple pillars, the duty of the moment, gospel poverty, and living the rhythm of the church's liturgical year. These form the basis of a Nazareth spirituality. These are simple things, but they're powerful. They're the seeds, I argue, the seeds of renewal. If we want to change the world, there's no better place to begin than with these 3. Now, this Nazareth spirituality shows families a path to foster a fully Catholic culture in their homes and communities, even in the midst of our secular culture. But what does it mean to build that culture? What does it mean to build up the domestic church? So let's talk a little bit about that. Of course, I think this is something we've seen Dr. Ray emphasizing many times. It begins with us. It begins with the parents. If we want strong Catholic families, If we want children who know and love the Lord, then we must begin with ourselves. We need to love the faith, and we need to live the faith. We need to build strong lives of prayer, personally and together as a couple. We need to pursue virtue. We need to grow in self-mastery. We need to be open to the transforming power of grace in our lives. And we need to know the faith. We need to know the faith. Parents don't need to be theologians to pass on the faith to their children. But today we simply cannot rely on our schools and parishes to catechize our children. We are the primary educators of our children, and that is an active calling. It's an active task, I think even more today than it may have been in the past. So, do what you need to do. Read books, listen to podcasts, find trustworthy resources to use with your kids, take courses, educate yourself, and then anything can become a teaching moment. But of course, passing on the faith isn't only about what we say, right? It's about who we are. Our children are watching us, not just our words, but our lives. And we need to be intentional about the witness that we are giving our kids in the home. Dads, do your kids see you pray? There's no witness more powerful to your children, I think, than seeing you as their father bent on his knees. Do they see you going to confession? Do they see you leading prayer with your wives? St. John Paul II spoke of what he called conjugal spirituality, a shared life of grace and prayer between husband and wife. In the church's teaching, the priest is the minister of the sacrament of confession. The priest is the minister of the sacrament of the Eucharist, but marriage is special. In the sacrament of marriage, it's the spouses that minister the sacrament to each other. And in a sense, you could say that ministry of the sacrament of marriage doesn't end on the wedding day. It's a daily lived reality. And this is not just about saying a few prayers together, though, of course, that's very important. It means cultivating a shared interior life, a union of heart and soul that's open to God and lived in God. And some days ministering the sacrament to each other might look something approximating deep prayer and unity. Other days, it might be just remembering that, charity means not complaining about how your spouse, does the dishwasher, that kind of thing. But it's in that daily self-gift, that husband and wife become a model for their children, forming their children for their own self-gift within the family and out in the world. Okay, so that's kind of beginning with the parents. But now let's talk a bit about family culture. Every home has a culture, but we need to ask, is our family culture intentional, and does it reflect the faith that we profess? Does it help our children love what is good and holy, or does it simply mirror the world around us? To build the domestic church means more than having a crucifix on the wall. It means more than saying grace before meals, beautiful as those things are. It means shaping a way of life, one that orients the heart toward Christ. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, I want to propose 7 simple but powerful practices. 7 practices. First, live by the church's calendar. Liturgical celebrations, observing the rhythm of the church's life, both through the sacraments and through customs practiced in the home, are a key pillar for building Catholic culture in the family. Catherine Doherty used to say that celebrating the faith is the best way to communicate the faith. And I think it's true. Living the liturgical year in the home is one of the most powerful ways to catechize our children. It can be also a quiet but compelling witness to others. So first and foremost, we have to anchor our homes in the sacraments. We have to make Sunday Mass the center of our week, go to confession regularly, attend Mass on feast days. If we can, even try to get to daily Mass. Even if only one family member can go, they go on behalf of the whole family. So consider the example of St. Gianna Molla and her husband, Pietro. The demands of Gianna's life with very young children didn't allow her to attend daily Mass with her husband, but he carried her intentions with him when he went day after day. And that act of prayer and generosity on his part helped pave his wife's path to sainthood. The Eucharist must be the source and summit of our families' lives. Let the rhythm of your family life reflect the rhythm of the church's life. Celebrate Advent, celebrate Christmas, Lent, Easter with visible, tangible traditions. Create simple family rituals that mark the liturgical year. Feast days could be marked with a special meal or a small treat. There are many beautiful family customs that we can draw on that are rooted in the centuries-old traditions of both Eastern and Western Christianity. Various examples, a Jesse tree during Advent, or an Epiphany house blessing, crowning a statue of Christ on the Solemnity of Christ the King, participating as a family in a local Corpus Christi procession, decorating Pisanki during Lent as preparation for Easter, Pisanki like Ukrainian Easter eggs. And we don't have to invent these things on our own. There are lots of excellent resources out there, of course, on the internet. Madonna House itself has published various wonderful guides. Actually, at our vendor table, I've brought a few copies of a book from Madonna House called Nazareth, Family Spirituality, where they describe a lot of this vision of Nazareth in the home and have suggestions for a lot of these family practices that you could use. Okay, so that's the first. The second, pray as a family every day. Pick a time, stick to it, fight for it. Family prayer doesn't need to be long or complicated, but it does need to happen. Evenings might work best for many, but, set up a prayer space, a family altar in your living room, maybe a candle, a crucifix. Read scripture, pray a family rosary, even a decade of the rosary. Sometimes when evenings have been busy for us, we've said a decade of the rosary at the dinner table because that's the best we can do that day. It's important that prayer is a consistent and regular part of family life. That don't overdo it, we don't overthink it, but also, don't worry if it's messy and distracted. And we've got toddlers climbing around your shoulders. That happens, of course. All right, third, read good books together. Now, spiritual reading is wonderful, but here I'm talking about literature, about classic children's stories, about great books that feed the imagination and bring a family together. Reading good stories aloud is one of the best things that you can do to build a strong family culture. Think of the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, Anne of Green Gables, or any of those countless gems that have stood the test of time. Stories are formative. They create a shared world of meaning. They nourish the imagination. They shape the soul. They spark amazing conversations, often when you would least expect it. And, it's also just a wholesome, joyful way to be together. There's nothing quite like piling on the couch and entering another world as a family. Make books a part of your family's life, even every day, if you can. Fourth, ensure that your kids get a strong intellectual and moral formation. Teach the faith intentionally. Don't leave your children's formation to chance. This is essential today as our culture seeks to form our children according to worldly values. Our children need and deserve to be steeped in the riches of our Christian tradition. Okay, fifth, cultivate beauty. Beauty lifts the heart toward heaven. Fill your home as best you can with beautiful things, sacred art, beautiful music, well-ordered spaces. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it's good to be intentional. Sixth, instill in your children a spirit of work and service. Teach your children to do chores with joy, to serve others with love, to embrace responsibility. Work isn't just about getting chores done, it's how we learn self-mastery, discipline, generosity. Chores are a preparation for vocation. Okay, and seventh, have fun together. Joy isn't optional, it's evangelical. Games, laughter, meals, hikes, music, jokes, they build memory, they build identity, affection. A joyful Catholic home is one of the greatest witnesses that we can offer to the world and to our own children. So, as St. Philip Neri said, cheerfulness strengthens the heart and makes us persevere in the good life. Therefore, the servant of God ought always to be in good spirits. Now, I'll be honest, it's hard to sustain this alone, right? That's why community matters. We need the church, we need our families, we need pastors, parishes, and institutions, communities that share our vision and help us to live it out. The family is the seedbed of cultural renewal, but if we're going to renew culture, we have to form intentional Catholic communities. We have to become what Pope Benedict XVI called creative minorities. small, faithful groups that preserve and radiate the light of Christ in a darkening age. Building community does take effort, right? It means opening our homes, taking initiative, risking awkwardness. It might mean inviting a new family over only to have your toddler proudly march into the living room wearing nothing but a superhero cape, right? That could happen. It might, the 8-year-old throwing a tantrum at the table because the 12-year-old keeps kicking him. Now, these are totally hypotheticals. Our kids are little angels. But I digress. When families live the gospel together, something beautiful begins to grow. A culture, a place of belonging, a visible sign of the kingdom. Now, I've seen this happen. I want to speak a little bit about my own institution, Our Lady's Seat of Wisdom College. Around Madonna House, in the Madawaska Valley in Ontario, a community of faithful Catholic families gradually took root. Drawn by the witness of Catherine Doherty's apostolate, these families came seeking a place where they could raise their children in the faith, a place where they could live that spirit of Nazareth together. They began to homeschool, to support one another, to build traditions together, and form a living Catholic culture. However, over time, they began to ask, how do we form our children not just in the early years, but all the way through adulthood? And they looked at the state of higher education in Canada, and they saw how deeply secularism had taken root. They knew that they couldn't trust their children's minds and souls to that. And so in faith, they built something new as a kind of creative minority. From that community of families, from that seedbed of these families living out the Nazareth spirituality around Madonna House, a new institution was born, Our Lady's Seat of Wisdom College. So we were founded in the year 2000, and at that time, we began with little more than a vision and a few humble classes in barns and at dining room tables. But it grew steadily, quietly, shaped by the same spirit that animated Catherine Doherty, a deep love for the church, a desire for truth, and a commitment to forming young people for holiness and mission. So today, we offer degrees. So we have a 3-year Bachelor of Arts in Christian Humanities. As of this year, we offer a 4-year Bachelor of Arts, honors Bachelor of Arts with majors in history, literature, classical and early Christian studies. We also offer courses in theology and philosophy and various other disciplines. But it was families that built our college, and they built it because they knew the stakes. They wanted a place where their children could be formed not just professionally, but spiritually, in mind and in heart. A place where Christ would remain at the center, a place that they could trust with their children's formation. So, now I want to move on to talk about public witness, that second part of the paradox that I mentioned towards the beginning. So the hidden life of Nazareth is not an end in itself, as Catherine would say. Christ spent 30 years in Nazareth preparing for 3 years of mission, culminating in 3 days of agony. Nazareth was his preparation for mission, and so it is for us. This call to mission is where many Catholic parents feel most uncertain, but it's precisely where our children need us most. They need our support and witness as they go out into the world to live and proclaim their faith. And so as we live the hidden life of Nazareth in our homes, building strong families rooted in prayer and love, we must also hear the church's call in our time to go out, to bring that love into the world, and to take up our share in the church's mission of evangelization. We live in a new moment. The Western world has become post-Christian. The church's place in the world then has shifted dramatically. We can no longer assume that faith will be passed on automatically or that the culture will support our efforts. In fact, today we are living in mission territory, effectively. And that's why this theme of missionary discipleship has become so central in the ecclesial discourse in our time. Of course, this call to mission isn't new, as we know. The church has always been missionary. Today we have the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul, which drives that home for us. And remember the words of St. Paul, "Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel." But still, this call to mission has nonetheless taken on fresh urgency in our times. St. John Paul II wrote about this in one of his encyclicals, Redemptoris Missio. He wrote, "God is opening before the church the horizons of a humanity more fully prepared for the sowing of the gospel. I sense that the moment has come to commit all of the church's energies to a new evangelization. No believer in Christ, no institution of the church can avoid this supreme duty to proclaim Christ to all peoples." Just this spring, I had the privilege of attending a beautiful event hosted by Archbishop Marcel Damphus of Ottawa. He had gathered hundreds of Catholics from his diocese to launch a new vision for the diocese, and he called it, "Go out, go deep, go together." And at the heart of his message was this simple truth, that we are being called to go out, to proclaim the gospel boldly, to invite others into God's plan, to witness publicly to Christ in a culture that has forgotten him. It can't be business as usual, right? The church needs to take account of the moment in which we're living. We have to adjust to this moment that we are living in. Now, Vatican II made it very clear that every baptized person shares in this evangelizing mission of the church. And building on this, John Paul II insisted that the Christian family itself is called to be an evangelizing community, his words. He declared that, quote, "The future of evangelization depends in great part on the church of the home." Catholic families are not passive recipients of the faith. We are active participants in the church's mission. Our homes are not just places where the faith is preserved. They're the very launch pad for mission. As John Paul II said elsewhere, the family is on mission. Holy Church of God, you cannot fulfill your mission if not by the family and its mission. The church cannot fulfill her mission without the family. The domestic church is the first and most vital cell of evangelization. So this is the task before us. Now, one of the most urgent questions that Catholic parents are asking today: how do I keep my children Catholic? There's no formula, right? There's no guarantee. But I want to argue that preparing our children for mission is the surest way to keep them strong in the faith. The simple truth is this: faith is strengthened when it is lived and shared. The more we give the faith away, the stronger it becomes in our own hearts. Mission deepens identity. So again, John Paul II said it very clearly. He said, "Faith and mission go hand in hand. A loss of vitality in the missionary impulse has always been the symptom of a faith crisis. Mission," he says, "is the surest antidote to a crisis of faith." Mission is the surest antidote to a crisis of faith. So, we have a duty to protect our children's innocence, to strengthen them against evil influences in the world. But ultimately, we can't protect our children by shielding them from the world. We protect them by preparing them for the world in age-appropriate ways, but forming them to engage the world as disciples. So, in practice, how does the domestic church live its missionary calling? First, I want to stress the power of the quiet witness that we give to the world by simply living faithfully as Catholic families, right? We don't always need loud words or grand gestures. A family that loves each other, prays together, and lives the gospel with joy is a sign of contradiction. We may never know when our faithfulness plants a seed, in a neighbor, a friend, a coworker, in our own children. But beyond that quiet witness, we do also need to be intentional about finding ways to live and proclaim our faith publicly. Not every family will live this call in the same way, right? Just as each religious order has its own unique charism. The Benedictines live their way, the Dominicans have their own way. So too, each Catholic family will embody its own particular call. Our task as parents is to discern that call through prayer and then to embrace it boldly. Whatever our particular path, the important thing is that our families become what they are: a living witness to the gospel in the world. So, there are various concrete ways that we could describe, that we could offer as ways that families could live this missionary call. I'll just mention maybe a few. Be active in our parishes, support our pastors, volunteer in parish ministries, look for ways that our children can serve, whether it's as altar servers, in the choir, through youth groups. Make our families a visible, joyful presence in the life of our parishes. Second, be visibly Catholic in the public square. Get involved in efforts to renew our culture. Join pro-life marches. Participate in Eucharistic processions. Speak the truth with both clarity, courage, and charity. And let our children see that our faith is not something private or hidden. It's a truth worth proclaiming, even when it's countercultural. Third, practice radical hospitality. Open our homes, welcome neighbors, fellow parishioners, non-Catholic friends, new families, share meals, build friendships. Let others encounter Christ in the joy and peace of our home lives. Fourth, engage in works of mercy. We can serve together as a family, volunteering at soup kitchens, visiting the elderly, helping local families in need, supporting pregnancy resource centers. Children will learn charity by practicing it. And then fifth, consider taking up more direct public evangelization. This is a more direct form of outreach, like street evangelization, door-to-door ministry. Not for everyone, but for those who are called, it can be a very powerful apostolic witness. Okay, so my friends, this is our task. In the great spiritual battle of our age, the witness of the domestic church is irreplaceable. Christ is calling Catholic families, yours and mine, to be beacons of light, to build homes where truth is cherished and God reigns at the center. Are we willing to do what it takes to raise children who are ready to stand for the truth? And are we willing to proclaim the gospel openly and to form our children to do the same? We can think again of the Ulma family. They didn't set out to be activists or heroes. They were a simple, faithful family who built a home rooted in the gospel. It was because they lived that hidden life of daily self-gift that when the hour of great testing arrived, they were ready. Long before the bullets came, they had already died to self and given their lives to Christ in the kitchen, in prayer, in the ordinary sacrifices of family life. Most of us won't be called to martyrdom, of course, but we are all called to be countercultural, to die to self, to be visibly Catholic in a world that finds our faith strange or offensive. So I urge you, be not afraid and know that you are not alone. This conference is a testament to that. So many faithful Catholic families here gathered. And we have all the support around us. We can see it. Also, I would urge you to consider Our Lady's Seat of Wisdom College for your children. We're here to stand with you, to carry on the work of formation that you've begun at home, to raise up a generation of young men and women who love the truth, who know their faith, and are ready to carry it boldly into the world. So if you are interested, we have a table in the vendor tent, so please do come by and talk to us. May your family be a sign of contradiction, a light in the darkness, a seed of renewal for the church and for the world. And may God give us the grace to be faithful. Thank you.